England, 1925. Part 1. Missing Children. The village of Blackthorn was bathed in the gold of autumn leaves, as if frozen on an old postcard. Thatched cottages, a shabby church, a narrow stream where women rinsed their laundry, singing old ballads. Children frolicked in the meadows, picking chestnuts and blackberries that grew in thick, thorny thickets at the edge of Blackthorn Forest. That year, however, fall came too soon. The fog rolled in at noon, and at night there were strange noises, as if someone were pounding the trunks of the trees with sticks. Elinor Hart was the first to disappear. An 8-year-old girl with flaxen curls and freckles had gone to get blackberries, as she did every Saturday. Her mother, Mrs. Hart, walked her to the gate and shouted after her, "Home before dusk, Ellie!" Dusk fell, and Elinor did not return. As the search dragged on past midnight, Mrs. Hart, gasping with terror, told the neighbors a strange thing. Just before sunset, she looked out the window and saw her daughter at the edge of the woods. Standing beside her was a small man, no taller than a child, but hunched over like an old man. He wore a green camisole, faded and patched, and from beneath a pointed hood, all she could see was a face without a nose, and fingers too long to grasp Elinor's wrist. She laughed, Mrs. Hart sobbed, as if he'd said something funny. Then they just stepped into the thicket. I called out for her, however, the forest was empty. 3 days later, the Brooks twins disappeared. However, the forest was empty. 3 days later, the Brooks twins disappeared. Tom and Jeremy, 2 cheerful tomboys of 10 years old, went looking for a lost sheep. They found them at dusk, standing at the edge of the woods, barefoot, their pants wet with dew. They did not cry. They did not ask for help. They just stood staring into the darkness between the trees, whispering the same thing. "He's funny. He said he had a dollhouse. We're going to play." Their parents put them to bed, figuring the boys were just overexcited. In the morning, however, the beds were empty. The window was open, and on the windowsill there were tiny, muddy, barefoot footprints, too small for a child, too wide for a man. Part 2. The Legend of MORLOCK. That same day, a gathering was called in the village. The men took rifles and torches. The women locked the children in the houses, curtaining the windows with black cloth. Jonas Grimm, the old shepherd, sitting by the fireplace in the Black Dog Tavern, said gloomily, "It's MORLOCK," he wheezed, and the word hung in the air thick as autumn fog. My ancestor told me that when these hills knew no plow and the forests were home to wolves the size of horses, there were whispers of him. Not a man, not a beast, but something ancient that lived here when the Druids were still setting stones. The old man looked around the audience with a gaze that flickered with something wild, primal. He comes when the children are no longer afraid of the forest. First, the whispers in the leaves when there's no wind, then the chuckles behind their backs, and then, if you see him. Jonas swallowed, in a green camisole that smells of damp and old bones. A mug dropped in the corner of the tavern, and everyone flinched. He lures them in with games and sweets. He makes a dollhouse out of mushrooms, a gingerbread man out of clay that comes to life in his scary fingers, and when he takes a child by the hand, the old man clenched his fist so that his knuckles turned white. Then he takes them to his hole under the roots of an old oak tree, where the sun has never been. They laughed at him at first. The miller Barlow clapped himself on his knees. "You've had too much to drink, old man. What tales you tell before you go to bed." However, the next morning, the blacksmith's daughter, little Annie, with eyes like violets in the forest, was gone. And on the threshold of their house, in the morning dew, clearly imprinted footprints, not children's, too wide with unnaturally spread toes, as if the feet had not known shoes for years, and between the toes, thin webbing, like a frog's. Every house in Blackthorn was locked up that day. The women christened the doorposts with rowan boughs, the men sharpened their scythes and axes. Even the church bell rang muffled, as if the fog were pressing on its brass sides. And from the forest, through the frequent rain, came a barely audible padding, as if someone small and nimble jumped on the puddles, approaching the village. Part 3. Hunting the Dwarf. A crowd of men gathered at dawn at the edge of the forest, with pitchforks, axes, old rifles. Their faces were gray with fear, but fury burned in their eyes. They entered the thicket, and it was as if the forest closed in behind them, swallowing all sound except the crunch of twigs under their boots and their heavy breathing. They walked for hours, shouting the names of the missing children, but the forest answered them only with echoes and the occasional cawing of crows. Then Jonas Grimm, walking ahead, stopped abruptly. Look. Between the roots of an ancient oak tree was a black hole, a low, narrow cave, the entrance to which was almost hidden by ferns. Near it lay a doll with its eyes gouged out, its ragged body covered with mold. The inside of the cave smelled of rot and honey, a sweetly nauseating odor. Torches illuminated other toys, wooden soldiers stained with something brown, dolls, and the belongings of missing children. After searching the entire cave, the men found no one. The next morning, the headman's 12-year-old son named Tobias disappeared from his room. He was found in the morning standing barefoot in the middle of the field in his nightgown, wet with dew. He said we'd all be playing soon, the boy whispered, his voice hoarse as if he had a lump of earth stuck in his throat. Then he collapsed to the ground. Part 4. The Last Disappearance. The last to disappear was little Agnes. Her mother, Martha, had seen her talking to someone under the bed. He said he had a dollhouse, the girl laughed. Martha grabbed her daughter, but she broke free and ran into the woods. The woman rushed after her, but only quiet giggles and whispers awaited her among the trees. Your turn will still come. Part 5. 1947. A find in the forest. Rain drizzled over Blackthorn Forest. On this day, two hunters, Jacob and Riley, had stumbled upon a strange depression in the ground. What they first thought was a foxhole turned out to be a dilapidated stone well, almost completely hidden beneath a tuber of poison ivy. Look, Riley whispered, pushing the leaves aside. The stones were covered in strange scratches, not with tools, but as if they were someone's claws. Jacob threw the rock down, and instead of the expected splash, they heard a dry cracking sound, as if the rock had fallen on a pile of brushwood. With the rope, they climbed down. The air there was thick, sweetly rotten. The first thing they saw were toys. Dozens of toys, covered in mold, but remarkably preserved. Then the flashlight picked out the white arcs of ribs from the darkness. The bones lay in a strange order. Some skeletons were neatly stacked along the walls, as if wrapped in cobwebs instead of diapers, arms folded across their chests, as if in prayer. And in the very corner, the creature sat leaning against the wall as if dozing. Its skin was parchment yellow, stretched over bone, its eye sockets empty, but its mouth stretched in a smile, wide, unnaturally wide, as if someone had inserted a brace between the jaws and left it like that for decades. Jacob cried out in fear of the monster he had seen. His loud scream echoed throughout the cave. That was the signal for Morlock to wake up. Since then, Riley and Jacob have never been seen again, and they have become Morlock's first meal in many years.